of you, we're live streaming this, so you can see us on kojoshow.org. And we'd like you to join the conversation. Do you have questions for Virginia's Attorney General? Give us a call at 1-800-433-8850 or send us an email to kojo@wamu.org. So, Mark Herring, these recommendations are the result of a task force you chair on campus sexual violence. How did the task force come about, and what's the goal of that effort?
Well, the task force report contains 21 really substantive recommendations. It's the work product of culminating of 8 months of hard work of task force members. And all of this really got started last year. In the spring, we all began talking about and having this long overdue national conversation about campus sexual violence. And as I listened to the conversation, I knew that we needed to do something here in Virginia as well. Reached out to the governor and his administration, and to his credit, he knew we needed to show leadership on this and supported it and wanted to work together on it. So late last summer, he issued Executive Order 25, which established this governor's task force to combat campus sexual violence. It was accompanied by a declaration that he and I and all 16 presidents of all of the Virginia public colleges and universities, as well as the chancellor of the community college system, joined into. And we were basically saying Virginia is not going to accept and tolerate sexual violence on our college campuses, nor will we allow a societal culture that condones it. And that was really the beginning of that work. You mentioned a couple of incidences that really shone a spotlight on our work as well. After we got started, there was a tragic disappearance and death of Hannah Graham, a young woman at the University of Virginia. Then not too long after that, the Rolling Stone article came out, and then that story unraveled and they retracted the story. So all of that really focused a lot of attention and spotlight on us as a task force. But we reflected on that, and the task force members took it to heart. We knew that so many people, parents, teachers, faculty, administrators, really all Virginians were counting on us to put our best work together. We stayed focused on our mission, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done. And this is a big step forward for Virginia.
This echoes in part a campaign the White House initiated last year, the result of a task force put together by President Obama. Why do you think it's important to address this at the state level also?
Well, as I mentioned, it's a long overdue national conversation, but these are our universities, our students, and Virginia needs to be a part of this. And we have really, I think, taken a huge step forward by providing an unprecedented amount of collaboration between the universities throughout Virginia, an unprecedented amount of collaboration or unprecedented amount of executive branch leadership on this issue. And ultimately, these are our colleges, our students, and I'm a parent as well. And you know, as a parent of 2 college-age children, our daughter just graduated a couple of weeks ago. Our son just finished his freshman year. Not a minute goes by, it seems, where his mom and I aren't worried about their safety, worried that they're making good decisions while they're away, just like all parents worry about it. And the last thing that parents should have to worry about when they send their kids to college is that they're going to become the victim of sexual violence and or be treated with some kind of a response that is, you know, treated with suspicion or even worse, indifference.
You can also join the conversation. What do you think needs to be done to address sexual assault on campus? Give us a call at 1-800-433-8850. Mark Herring, can you start out by outlining the main recommendations in this first report?
Sure. Well, the recommendations really fall within 5 different themes. The first one being engaging our colleges and communities in comprehensive prevention to make sure that we're having programs that are effective at preventing sexual violence on our campuses. Another one is about removing barriers. You know, we heard a lot about how many barriers there are, how survivors and victims are often afraid to come forward and make these reports. Sometimes it's because they are suspicious that they're not going to be believed, or that you know, there's apprehension about how they're going to be perceived by their peers on campus or their parents, or it could be perceived as a daunting, complex process. So removing those barriers to reporting is important. Also, making sure that all of the different parties who are a part of this are collaborating in a trauma-informed way. I think what that, and for folks who may not know what that means, it's about having people who are responding to reports of sexual violence, people who are investigating those, have special training to recognize the neurobiology of trauma and ask questions in a way that are designed to maximize recall, that are understanding of the trauma that the victim and survivor has gone through to make sure they're not further victimized. Also making sure that we have policies that are compliant with the law, but also that work with the students. And then the last theme was making sure that this work is institutionalized, because these task force recommendations are the first step. Next comes the implementation, and that's going to require a commitment to work together to keep this issue, on the front burner, not let it fall into the back burner. And so those are kind of the themes of it. And I'd love to share with you some of the recommendations to give folks an idea of really what we're talking about here. One of them is, I talked earlier about the barriers to reporting. And one of the recommendations, and you'll appreciate this given your field of study and computers and social networking and social media, college kids today are used to doing so much online, signing up for classes,
Absolutely.
communicating with each other on social media. And we really need to meet students where they are, use the communications tools they use. So one of the recommendations calls for using emerging technologies for more reporting options, online portals, smartphone applications, as well as clear infographics to make it really clear to people and to students about how to go about making a report and what the process is.
One area that's a focus of these recommendations is that colleges and universities develop a comprehensive prevention plan. Talk about what that could or should entail.
That sounds straightforward. Direct all of the universities to have a comprehensive prevention plan. And all of the universities do have programs designed to prevent sexual violence on campus, but not all of them are the kind of evidence-based programming with repeated programs designed to prevent sexual violence. So, just a couple of hours here and there during orientation week is not going to do it. Ideally, first of all, the students, when they get there, would already have some grounding in healthy relationships and the importance of mutual respect. And then a comprehensive prevention plan is something that is going to require the faculty, student leaders, experts in sexual violence, substance abuse, mental health, come together with evidence-based programs to design, all 4 years. Not just during orientation week, but during the entire time the student is at the university, to get these prevention messages and information, and in that way prevent sexual violence from happening at all. And also important to have as a part of that plan some kind of metrics or mechanisms to assess how well it's working, and communicating with different subgroups in the student population. Again, I think your field of study would tell us a lot about that how you communicate with a college freshman might be different than how you communicate with a college senior. Maybe there are different strategies to communicate preventions, measures to those who are active in athletics, collegiate athletics, or active in Greek life, or a minority community. So it really needs to be a multidisciplinary approach, multifaceted approach to preventing sexual violence.
So I'm someone who's been in universities since I was old enough to be in them, right? I have never left. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland.
So you're hearing a lot about these issues as well, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I've seen it from both sides, right? As I spent 10 years as either an undergrad or a graduate student and saw these sorts of trainings, and then now looking at it from the university side. And I wonder, what are some of the steps that are recommended to preventing or reducing assaults? And in particular, who are you focusing this on? Because a lot of this is traditionally, told women, don't have too much to drink and protect your drink and don't do this. Is there equal attention to the often men who are perpetrating these assaults and preventing it from that side?
Absolutely. And that's a part of what a comprehensive prevention plan is all about. And, there is no excuse for sexual violence, period. And at the same time, we have to recognize that alcohol consumption does put someone at a higher risk. And those types of prevention programs to let students know what kind of risk behavior to avoid, those types of things are really campus-wide, and not just four-year colleges. We just had a summit a couple of weeks ago tailored to the community colleges in Virginia. Hundreds of thousands of Virginians will be getting college credit from community colleges. Well, they have to be a part of this conversation as well, and I was really pleased to see the attendance. It seemed like there were over 100 administrators and faculty
Wow.
from community colleges as well. And so that kind of comprehensive plan is really important. And again, the implementation is what's going to be really important. And a lot of different folks have to have a part of this. Some of it is going to be on the colleges and the administrators to implement. Some of it's going to require legislation. And the General Assembly took a real active interest in this subject in the last session. I'm hopeful and confident that that same level of interest will be there again, and they'll move forward with some of the statutory recommended changes. But ultimately, and this is something that I found very encouraging, I heard one student leader say that there had been studies done like this before. This was during the task force. But he thought this time it was going to be different, that he really thought this generation of students wants to make a change in the climate. And I've talked to a lot of students in that time, and I get that same sense too. This time, they really want the climate to change. They want things like bystander intervention programs to be successful. These are the kinds of things that we need to be working on, and it's state government, it is colleges and administrators, it's law enforcement, it's campus advocates, and the students themselves.
We have a bunch of people who've called in, so I'd like you to put your headphones on so we can take some calls. If you'd like to join us, if you have questions for Attorney General Mark Herring, you can call us at 1-800-433-8850. Let's start with Jody in Herndon, Virginia. Jody, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, I am a personal safety training expert. I actually own my own training academy, and I train large organizations and college campuses and universities. And I'm so excited to hear that you've put together all of these things. It's really great.
So we're having a little bit of trouble with Mark Herring picking up the sound. He's not getting you on his headphones.
Okay.
I'm going to put you back on hold, and we're going to come back to you and take your question in a minute, Jody. So if you don't mind, just hang on.
Sure. Thank you.
So Mark Herring, while we're working that out, do you have sound now?
I think that works.
Okay, let's try to bring Jody back. Jody, can you try one more time?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, now we can hear you.
I
Sorry.
can hear you loud and clear now.
Okay, great. Well, I'm actually owner of a personal safety training organization, and I train large organizations as well as college campuses and universities. And I'm really excited to see what you've put together.
Thanks, Jody. Did you have a question?
I do. One of the things that I see that's an issue over and over is that the majority of the actions that have been taken have been people that are focusing on the aftermath and the reporting. And I'm really excited to hear that you're focusing as well on the prevention aspect. In terms of the reporting, on average, a national average, about 25% of incidents and domestic violence incidents and assaults are actually reported. So it's wonderful to see that you're trying to make it easier for them to do the reporting, because a lot of people won't even do that. And I really focus on the prevention aspect. And one of the issues that I see over and over is that the colleges are having issues with budgets because they're putting money towards the reporting aspects. They're really not putting anything towards the prevention. And when we look at the prevention, a lot of colleges do actually have their own programs in place. However, nothing is mandatory. And so the college campus women will never attend because they think that they're safe. Unless something's happened to them, they're not actually going to attend. So did you talk about some specific strategies on how to help that, really move forward?
Jody, thanks for your call.
Well, the caller made a lot of really good points. First of all, the statistics and the magnitude of the problem are really shocking and appalling. The CDC recently put information out that 1 in 5 women will be the victim of sexual violence or attempted sexual violence at some point in their lifetime. And it's too easy, even when you look at those numbers and those statistics, to forget behind every single one of those numbers, every single statistic, there's a student whose life has been changed forever. So the magnitude is important. It's also important to recognize that this is a crime and conduct that is often underreported for all of the reasons that we've talked about before, that it's underreported. And as long as there is one act of sexual violence on campus, both prevention and response is going to be important. So we'll need to work on both of those. It's not putting everything all toward response or putting everything all toward prevention. We have to work on both, and bring in law enforcement as a partner. You know, one of the things that I heard was that they've got a lot of prevention programs, the law enforcement do, but they're often siloed. So that you've got the university working on prevention, you've got law enforcement working on prevention, but they really need to come together to make sure that they're communicating the messages in the right way and consistently. And I talked also on the response side. You know, one of the recommendations that I think is going to be really helpful is it calls for the Department of Criminal Justice Services to develop a curriculum to train those who are a part of the university's response to reports, as well as those who are investigating it, and do so in a trauma-informed way. I think that making sure that, you know, because one of the things we heard a lot about was there's some great people who are working in this area, but the level of experience, the level of training is inconsistent across the whole state. And so what this would do is bring everybody up to make sure that they know and understand what each other's responsibilities are, and then make sure that they have the kind of training that's needed to provide the response that reduces the risk of further victimization and encourages more reporting. Because when we encourage reporting and we make sure that folks feel comfortable coming forward, we make sure that it's more likely that the survivor and the victim will be able to get access to services that they need to put them on a path toward healing, and make it more likely that we bring the perpetrator to justice.
You had mentioned before that one of the student leaders you talked to had said, you know, this is a generation where this is a problem that we want addressed. And I certainly believe that the vast majority of students you would talk to on campus would be appalled by that sort of action. At the same time, you know, we at the University of Maryland had this problem in what seemed like a flurry of messages that were kind of intercepted from fraternities in the fall, that were deeply misogynistic, advocating ways to get girls drunk so you could take them back to your room and have sex with them. A lot of universities had these emails leaked out from their Greek system in the fall. And that is certainly an issue that has to be addressed on the prevention side. So I wonder, how do the task force recommendations suggest you would deal with that kind of problem where you have an element of the campus culture that isn't interested in eliminating this problem, that sort of sees it not as a problem, but an entertainment?
Well, that gets to the deeper issues about climate, and also about making sure that when students get to a college or university, they're already getting a healthy dose of information about good relationships and mutual respect. The comprehensive prevention plan, part of it also talked about a role that K-12 education has. Again, it's got to be age appropriate and development appropriate, but the students, when they come to campus, have to have already some preparation for that. And then the programs have to work toward making sure that they build off of those. And one of the things that has been successful, again, these are evidence-based programs like the bystander intervention. When these programs are able to get their college peers to step in and say and recognize a dangerous situation or a situation that could easily get to a dangerous point, to have the peers step in and say, no, that's not acceptable. Not only do you reduce the risk of something happening at that particular time or shortly after it. But studies show that the people around who are a part of that conversation begin to think about the conduct and modify it in a way that minimizes risk that it will turn into a dangerous situation.
We're going to take a quick break. If you've called in, please stay on the line. If you'd like to call, if you have questions for Mark Herring, give us a call at 1-800-433-8850. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us. Coming up at 1, Dark Days for the Beautiful Game, the future of international soccer in the wake of a major corruption scandal. Today at 1 on the Kojo Nnamdi Show on WAMU 88.5 and streaming at kojoshow.org. Welcome back. I'm Jen Golbeck from the University of Maryland, sitting in for Kojo. We're talking with Mark Herring, Attorney General for the state of Virginia, about sexual assault on campus. If you'd like to join the conversation, give us a call at 1-800-433-8850. Mark, one issue is that survivors of sexual assault all feel re-victimized by the system. What do you think needs to change on campus and in law enforcement?
Well, there are a number of really good recommendations that the report talks about. Again, removing the barriers to reporting is really important, but making sure that the response to a report is one that is supportive, that the survivor feels like they are going to be believed, and that's really important to make sure that the survivors that really every Virginia student needs to know that if they come forward and report an incident of sexual violence, they are not going to be treated with suspicion and they are not going to be pressured, but they are going to be treated with the respect and the compassion that they deserve. And by having people who are trained in the neurobiology of trauma, they can ask questions in a way that, again, is designed to maximize recall, to minimize the risk of further victimization. Those are the kinds of recommendations that can really go a long way to addressing the problem. And we also have to keep in mind that what this may mean is that the number of reports rises, but that should not necessarily signal that the crime is happening more frequently, but rather the climate is one in which those who feel victimized feel more comfortable coming forward.
We're going to take a few more calls, if you can put your headphones back on and keep those on for a little while. Let's start with Mary in Alexandria, Virginia. Mary, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, hello. I'm pleased to hear about all the efforts that are being made to address this problem and the strategies that you're devising. But there is an aspect to this that I think is under attended to, and that is you're talking, as you say, about a crime, and it is an attack. Well, this is not, and then it tends to get kind of glamorized by having the word sexified, if that's the weapon, and it is indeed an element. However, sexual attacks are not like rain. I think I would like to hear more attention paid to the payoff, this is anti-competitive behavior if you stand back and look at it. What's the effect on the victims? To make them smaller, more submissive, get them many times to leave the school. It isn't just a matter of how it's being responded to by the school, although all of these strategies are very positive. It really is, I think, a matter of taking the glamour out and really making it more evident to both the men and women on the campus that this is a strategy with a payoff for men. And I think that it needs more attention, and in that regard, less assumption that he's got to have it, and so there will be a problem. These are attacks, and they do have an effect, which is, ugly as it may be, is a payoff for men, and I think should be addressed that way too.
Mary, let me get Mark Herring's comments on that. Obviously, there is a payoff for the perpetrators here, and the victims are certainly disempowered in a lot of different ways. Is that something that the task force has addressed in their response and aftermath training?
Well, the task force took in hours and hours and hours of expert information about this issue from every single perspective possible, including those types of dynamics. And it recommends, in terms of prevention, strategies for colleges and universities to put into place. It has a lot of recommendations on how to respond, but also recognizes that these are crimes, and law enforcement has an important role to play. And it recognizes the need for more memorandum of understanding between the colleges and law enforcement, so that each other's responsibilities and expectations are made clear.
So a point that Mary raised that you just addressed there is this issue that campuses often handle sexual assault internally. We have a call from John in Arlington, Virginia, who wants to address that. John, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Attorney General Herring. I'm a defense attorney, but I also started off in legal services. So I've also prosecuted for victims of domestic assault, obtained civil protective orders for them. I'm very uncomfortable with the sub rosa system of justice in these administrative processes, because from my perspective, I feel that they quite often leave the victims feeling very unsatisfied and that their interests haven't been well represented. But at the same time, as a defense attorney, I want fairness and due process for those who are accused, even if there's dispute over what percentage of false reporting there is. Or I'm wondering, as part of the recommendations to get it out of the administrative system on campus and into a plenary process in the court system, whether your task force has looked into the possibility of independent representation by attorneys knowledgeable in the civil protective order process, where there's a lower standard of proof. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's a preponderance of evidence. And there is a plenary process, which, although I don't like it as a defense attorney, I don't think it's adequate. At least it protects the rights of both the accuser, the victim, and also the accused. And I don't think the university's interests are necessarily in alignment with the victim. And I'm wondering if many of these cases can't be channeled out to pro bono volunteers or people who are attorneys who are compensated to advise victims of their rights to civil protective orders, which could be quite effective in serving some of the ends you've been talking about.
John, thanks for your call. So John raised a couple interesting points there. One, it would be great if you can talk about the distinction between these internal reviews at universities and then also what's being done in law enforcement. But then there's this additional question of the university's interests, right? And this is something that, especially being on the university side, I've seen come up in a lot of discussions, which is the university may have an interest in not having a lot of sexual assaults reported on its campus. And are they going to handle these complaints in a way that maybe, as you said, increase the numbers because the reporting is increasing, when it may also make them, number-wise look bad?
Well, let's take the first part of that first, and that is the different laws that come into play. So there's obviously the one side on the law enforcement side where these are crimes and handled in the court system, where the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, and so forth. Now, that does not preclude or relieve the school's obligation to make sure that everyone who attends that university is able to avail themselves of the full range of opportunities. And the relationship between the student and the school and the federal laws that come into play mandate that the universities have procedures where sanctions that are appropriate to the conduct are imposed to make sure, again, that the climate is one in which every student is able to avail themselves of the benefits of being at that university. And if an instance of sexual assault and violence and misconduct occur, that steps are taken administratively to remove all of the negative implications that come along with that and make it safe. And the recommendations make clear that we've got to have the colleges and universities need to have policies in place that are both legally compliant with those federal laws. And it gets very complex very quickly between the Title IX requirements and FERPA and the Violence Against Women Act and so forth. So on the one hand, to make sure that they're compliant with the law, but also that they're working for the students and that they are designed and written and followed in a way that will result in a fair, prompt, and a just outcome for all involved, the accuser as well as the accused, and that it will be followed with a sanction that is appropriate to the conduct. So that's the first part of it, is there are those federal laws and requirements to make sure that the schools are following them. And then the second piece of that is making sure that that everyone's rights are respected, and the report certainly recognized that. The Law Enforcement Subcommittee had a lot of information and testimony about the importance of that for all involved.
These recommendations all sound like solid steps, but what about implementing them? Is there going to be the political will and funding to make sure they can be put into practice?
Well, absolutely. And I want to tell you that I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure that the different stakeholders who all right now are absolutely committed to moving forward continue that work. First of all, the task force recognizes the importance of making sure that this work continues. One of the recommendations calls for a committee under the auspices of the State Council on Higher Education in Virginia to oversee the implementation, continue the discussion, making sure that the most current information and recommendations are being followed through. Every college president has jointly declared that they are committed, and Aniel Cabrera, the president from George Mason, reiterated that at the task force meeting when we presented the report to the governor, that the presidents are committed to implementing this. And again, one of the most positive things I've heard is that a lot of student leaders want to make sure that these changes continue. So we had everybody around the table, all the different stakeholders, a lot of buy-in and a lot of support. What we need to do is keep this momentum going. We need to make sure that we don't let this get on the back burner. We've made too much progress. This is a tremendous step, but it is just a first step. And I am committed to doing everything I can, and I know the governor is too, to make sure that these get implemented.
What's happening so far legislatively on the issue? I understand last week the General Assembly unanimously passed and Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe signed bills related to campus sexual assault. What are some of the changes required by that legislation?
Well, one of them would require certain employees of universities, when they have information about a sexual violence or sexual assault, that they communicate that to the Title IX coordinator, who then can confer with the threat assessment team, so that even if someone who comes forward with a report may not want to file a criminal complaint, that the threat assessment team takes a look at it to see whether there is ongoing risk of violence, and if so, take appropriate steps with law enforcement. So that's one of the ones. Another would provide a notation on a transcript if student withdraws while there's a pending sexual misconduct claim. So those were signed ceremonially. He had signed them previously, so those are now moving into law. There are a number of recommendations that call for additional legislative changes. I mentioned one of them being that will require some budget support as well. If the Department of Criminal Justice Services develops this curriculum and training for everyone who responds to reports and investigates those reports. There are some other ones as well. For example, right now, if a physical evidence recovery kit as a part of a sexual violence incident. If the survivor at that time doesn't want to make a criminal complaint, well, that kit gets sent to a state lab. It's kept for 120 days and then disposed of without notification to the victim survivor. So what this recommendation would do is call for a mandated period of time in which law enforcement would be required to keep those kits, so that if the survivor feels that the right time to bring a criminal complaint is some period of months later, that evidence will be there.
And that recommendation extends, I think, to 2 years, right?
That's the
time that kids
recommendation,
slept.
right?
So the recommendations of the task force on sexual assault now go to the governor. What's next?
Well, we expect now that they've been presented to the governor, he and administration are going to study it, as well as a number of the different departments who touch this subject. So Department of Public Safety, Department of Education, Department of Criminal Justice Services will be studying them. The universities will be studying them. A lot of folks will be looking at them. Some of these recommendations are policy related that can begin implemented perhaps as early as when students begin to return in the fall. So there's going to be a long implementation period, but we are committed to sticking to it and making sure that we end campus sexual violence in Virginia.
So I'd like to switch gears. We only have a couple minutes left, and I have a lot of minutes worth of questions for you. But I think I'm going to pick this one. Last time you were on the Kojo show, I think I was also sitting in for Kojo, and we talked about same-sex marriage in Virginia. One of your first moves in office was to change the state's legal position on same-sex marriage, reversing your predecessor's stance because you believed the ban was unconstitutional. Of course, the Supreme Court weighed in last year in October, and same-sex marriages now take place in Virginia. But until that point, Virginia had a constitutional ban that had been in place for 8 years and passed overwhelmingly by the voters in 2006. Many felt your predecessor in the AG's office, Ken Cuccinelli, was aggressive in using the office to pursue a conservative social agenda. Are you concerned that a similar criticism could be leveled at you on your side? And how do you navigate being at odds with some Virginians on issues like same-sex marriage? We've got about a minute and a half left.
Well, I'm really proud of what our team has been able to accomplish in just a short period of time in office, 16 months. We changed the state's position in the marriage equality case. The lower court agreed with us. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals also agreed. And ultimately, the Supreme Court allowed that ruling to stay in place. And since then, 1,500, 2,000 same-sex couples have now been married in Virginia, and children of same-sex couples are now getting the legal protections they need and deserve. Earlier, we also worked to ensure quality education, higher education for all Virginians, including Dreamers, the children of immigrants who've grown up in Virginia, and want to continue their education in college. We supported the effort to protect the insurance subsidies for working Virginians who are working to get affordable health insurance. So I'm real proud of a lot of the things we've been able to do. We've made sure that all of our
Mark
actions
Herring,
are solidly grounded
I'm
on
going
the
to have
law.
to cut you off there.
Okay.
We're right out of time. Mark Herring is Attorney General for the state of Virginia. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jen Golbeck, sitting in for Kojo.